What's going on, everybody? It is your boy Zamboni. I am an herbalist and astrologer, and it is time to talk about the astrology of the week ahead. Thank you so much for being here. As always, I super appreciate y'all. If you want to check me out on Patreon, then that can be helpful. If you want to go to Spotify and listen to Can't Help Myself another couple of times, that'd be great. If you want to send me a tip via Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, that is extremely helpful. I can't say how very helpful that is. I like having food to eat and a place to stay, and you make that possible. Thank you so much for doing that. Let's talk about the astrology of the week ahead. So this week we see a major change taking place here. So we've had Mars in Taurus for a few weeks here. It's been about 6 weeks of Mars in Taurus, and that has been a lot. That's been stirring up the whole Saturn-Uranus dynamic. Now, to see Mars moving out of Taurus means that we just don't have to deal with that same sort of inflammatory situation anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have Saturn-Uranus to deal with for the rest of the year, because we do. Saturn and Uranus are in fact getting closer still, and are just gonna be within a degree of each other for the next like 2.5 months or something ridiculous. Like, it's a really long time. And so every time the moon hits a fixed sign, then, which is gonna happen at least one time a week, then we're gonna see this sort of stuff coming up. We've got eclipses coming up in Scorpio season. That's not for a little while. We got another few months before that. But before the year is out, we've still got a bunch more of this Saturn-Uranus to do. However, at least Mars is not in that situation, inflaming the whole situation. We can sort of think about how in 2020, the whole collapse of the world, or whatever you think happened in 2020, that happened under the auspices of Saturn and Mars together. It was Saturn and Mars together in Capricorn, and then later Saturn and Mars together in Aquarius, and that seemed to really sort of time the biggest breaks in that situation. So to see Mars moving away from Saturn feels a little helpful to us. It feels a little bit like it's less of this sort of like super push on the Uranus, and the Uranus wants to sort of like make things explode and flip over and all that sort of stuff. Mars moving out of that sign is super helpful. Also, Mars just doesn't like being in Taurus very much. Mars doesn't like the Venus signs. And so Mars moving out of a Venus sign and into Gemini, into a Mercury sign, like Mars isn't particularly great in Gemini, but he's not particularly terrible in Gemini, and we'll fucking take that. It's a good time for us to sort of like, just whatever, especially whatever house you have Taurus in, just like, it's not like we get a like sigh of relief here, or a real like break or a vacation or anything like that. Like I said, Uranus Saturn is still on for, the rest of the year and then some, but it is nice to not have the Mars there. Mars is moving into Gemini, and Mars is going to be in Gemini for the next 7-8 months or something like this, a very long period of time, again, throughout the rest of the year and then some. I think Mars moves out of Gemini in like late March of next year or something like that. Long time. What we're going to do is we're going to see Mars moving forward and slowing down, then go backwards for a little while, and we're going to have a Mars retrograde through Gemini as well. So there has been a lot said about Mars retrograde in Gemini and about how difficult that could be. People have been talking about cybersecurity threats and all this sort of stuff. A lot of times when we see Mars in an air sign like this, or in a Mercury sign, then we can think about like anxious thoughts, or there's a situation of like too much mind, or Marsy style communication. We can think about angry words, or just fast words, fast communication back and forth, that sort of thing. It's a little bit like when you've typed a whole paragraph and then somebody comes back at you with okay. It's like that, the shortness of that is aggressive, right? This is kind of how Mars in Gemini likes to operate, right? And so we can definitely see that sort of stuff taking place here. But because this is such a long-term situation, we've got Mars in Gemini for so long, then we maybe don't need to sweat all of the Mars retrograde stuff right this moment. You know what I mean? Like, there's plenty, like, for the moment, we get a nice opportunity. Like, so if you've got I don't know, the ascendant at 2 degrees of Gemini or something like that, then you might, especially if you've got a day chart or something like this, then like that's probably going to be annoying for you. But for the wide majority of people, for the world at large, it's going to be nice to have Mars not in a Venus sign anymore and rather in a Mercury sign. So I do like to see this Mars in Gemini. Now, the problem that we run into here is that we also have the new moon in Virgo this week. Now, the new moon in Virgo is also in a Mercury sign. So we should definitely pay attention to what's going on with Mercury. What's happening with Mercury? Well, currently today, Mercury is in Virgo, opposite to Neptune. We like Mercury in Virgo a lot. We don't like Mercury opposite Neptune as much. I personally expect difficulty on like uploading this video, for example. Like it doesn't look good for the Mercury stuff. It looks like it wants to miscommunicate. It looks like it doesn't like it. It looks like talking past each other or confusion. I mentioned in my daily that verse could be really good. Metaphor, song, this kind of thing can be really good. But like trying to get understandable or intelligible information from this Mercury is going to be difficult. By the time we get to the new moon, then Mercury is actually going to have moved into Libra. Now, Mercury is starting to slow down at this point, and we're going to have a retrograde. We're going to have a Mercury retrograde in Libra as well. Now, this is important because Mercury is going to be in Libra at the time of the new moon. So there's a new moon in Virgo. This new moon in Virgo is going to be under a tight square from that Mars in Gemini. So that's where we sort of run into a couple of problems with this Mars first thing. And so if we're going to be paying attention to this longer term Mars cycle, then which is going to last for 8 months or whatever it is, then Mars is going to have something to say about this new moon right now, right? There's a new moon in a Mercury sign that is going to get Marsed up. It's under this square from Mars. It's also, Mercury has a nice trine to Mars. Mercury in Libra makes a nice trine to Mars in Gemini. So that's helpful. We like that. But we can see here that both of these planets, both Mars and Mercury, are headed toward retrogrades. And so one of the things that I'm thinking about here with Virgo, especially Virgo likes to make things intelligible, likes to organize, it likes to get a sense of the data and what sort of information is important. We put Mars into an information sign and it wants to make it actionable. It wants to make it useful somehow. It wants to take the information and be like, okay, if this, then blank, then action, right? And that can be really great, especially in a moment where there's like a lot of paralysis going on. There's a lot of like, I don't really know what's right or what the good move is. They're like, everything I do seems to kind of make it worse. Like, I don't really like that sort of paralysis can become a problem. And so the Mars in this moment can be good for simply deciding on a direction and just try some shit. Let's just try going in this direction. And if it's not the right direction, then we will know that. And at least we will now know that that direction is the wrong one, rather than just sitting here and not getting any information at all, right? And so because we see this retrograde motion, because we see so much emphasis on mutable signs are known for being adaptable and changeable and all this sort of stuff, flexible, then what I feel like is going on under this new moon is starting out in a direction simply because you need to, you gotta try some stuff sometimes, and then you don't necessarily need to marry that direction. You don't need to like commit to that particular thing, right? Another way to think about this is like, let's try some stuff. Let's be flexible about it. Let's remember that there's a lot of chaos in the system right now. We've still got this Uranus-Saturn dynamic that's not going away. We're going to be seeing these retrogrades. We're going to have to go back and revise and edit and all this sort of stuff. So now's a good time to get your pencil out, not your pen, right? Now's a good time to make sure that you can do your edits, make sure that you, one of my favorite YouTubers, Khadija Mbowe, the name of her podcast is You Can Always Change Your Mind. You can, in fact, change your mind. And so it is a good time now to think about moving in a direction, but you don't have to stay moving in that direction for always. Now, it's always good to think with your desire work, where am I trying to go? What does the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible actually look smell, taste, feel like, all that sort of stuff. Thank you for being here. I'm out of time again. Please check out the podcast, What is the Time with Zamboni Funk. I worked really hard on it, and I want you to watch it. Thank you for being here. Please send me a tip by Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. Thank you for being here with me, fam. I appreciate you. See you next time.